Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard, and welcome back to a Stock Market Outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And this week we continued higher on the Nasdaq and stayed above the 50 and 21 EMA, both of which are now rising underneath price, which is certainly constructive. But we did find a little bit of resistance here on this past Friday, finishing off the highs here, and we are still below this high right here, as well as this unfilled gap at this moment. However, I do think it's constructive how the 50 and 21 EMA are now rising, supporting the price, and we're staying above this level right here from this prior pivot. So overall, things look better on the Nasdaq. We're staying above those key moving averages, and it looks like if we maybe pull back a little bit and then continue upward, we could really challenge these all-time highs. Looking over at the S&P 500, this continues to be the stronger index, right near all-time highs, and once again, it also had a constructive week, pretty much just going sideways but slowly drifting higher and staying above a rising 21 and 50 SMA. So like with the Nasdaq, ideally we do see a little bit of a shakeout here, some constructive action, a kind of drift downwards back into the 21 EMA, and then a challenge of these all-time highs. Looking at the other indexes, the IWM, looking at this, you can see we're basing nicely, moving out the right-hand side here, and we do want to see a stay above this 226.69 pivot and challenge this 230.95 pivot as we try to challenge these all-time highs. But overall, this ETF looks constructive as we build up this right-hand side and stay above those key moving averages. And lastly, before we get into some stocks, let's take a look at the IWO, the Russell 2000 Growth. And overall, this is the kind of worst performing of the indexes we've gone over. This has been hit very, very hard, and we're still facing a declining 50 SMA, and at this point, we're just barely below that key moving average, but we are above that 21 EMA, which is now rising. So we'll see if we can kind of cement ourselves above the 50 SMA next week and the 300 level and make our way up towards this pivot as well. So for stuff to really start ripping here, we want to see sustained uptrend like we saw back here. And when we get this nice uptrend on the IWO, that's when things will start really working. We'll see leadership groups develop as well, and things just become a lot easier for traders, especially kind of swing position traders. So overall in this video, we'll talk about my focus list, how it performed this past week. We'll talk about potential new leadership, old leaders, how they're performing. Then we'll go in depth on the weekly charts of these indexes. We'll talk about sentiment, the Ibd Big Picture article, and finally the Gmi Signal from richardlmoglen.com. And at any time, if you do enjoy my analysis, please go and leave a like down below, where it does help me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one every single week. And diving right in, let's first take a look at potential new leadership and sorting about that weekly change. I just updated this list today, actually. So let me know down below in the comments any stocks I should add to this list that you view as potential leaders with great technicals as well as fundamentals. So starting things off, we've got TGLS, which is a lower dollar volume name. So that's one knock against it, but its technicals have been superb. After this earnings move up here, it's basically traded above average volume every single day with huge blue skyscrapers really catching my eye here. So if it does pull back to the 21 EMA and form a nice shelf, I'll be looking for an entry. But overall on the monthly chart, looks great, very constructive, and we see a lot of big winners start with a breakout through their IPO highs. So this should be one to keep an eye on if it does consolidate and set up a potential entry. So overall, that's TGLS. Next up, we've got Roblox. Super powerful move out of this IPO base here. You had a lot of pivots around 77, 78 or so. Great volume on the breakout as well. And today we are seeing some profit taking, but it is on lower volume. So far, this looks constructive and potentially kind of goes sideways for a few days and then continues the uptrend. But overall, the trend remains intact, and this looks very, very strong at this point. CRCT is another recent IPO that looks very strong. Great action here, and looking back here, look at all this very tight action before this pop. So something significant was going on here, some nice accumulation. We did revisit that point, but we had a nice pocket pivot, a nice kicker candle here, and a strong uptrend from that point. And overall, you do see a move down from the highs here, and it is definitely short-term extended, but I will be watching this carefully for a potential pullback at some point, maybe to this level and the 21 EMA. I love when there's kind of confluence between two major areas, the moving average as well as a prior pivot right there. VSTO also had a strong move this past week, breaking out of this base. And overall, this is when you want to be getting into the stock through these highs here, as well as this one right here. A great volume as well. And today on this Friday, very constructive action, very tight, as well as a strong closing range and holding above that close. So we'll see if this kind of follows through to the upside sometime next week. F as well, Ford had a very strong move this past week, breaking out of this nice cup. Look at the volume coming in. Now let's actually go to a weekly chart to really show that here. Huge volume, the highest in quite a while since really this bottom here. So this really looks significant here. And obviously you've got the catalyst of the electric Ford F-150. So this really could have legs, and we'll see if this can kind of continue to trend and allow us to get in at some point. ASO also trended higher, breaking above this kind of tight action against the 21 EMA. A nice pocket pivot here, and continues to trend right near all-time highs, making price new highs today. App, another recent IPO to keep your eye on. A nice kind of move up from this bar right here, 3-bar break to the upside, and continues to trend nicely, breaking above the IPO base high here. And we'll see if it can kind of have the legs to really move up strongly, or if it needs to kind of consolidate here, frustrate people before then moving up to the upside. FNKO, nice move as well, breaking above the 25 level and the inside bar and up, and overall right near all-time highs at this point. Really strong move here, and the up-down volume ratio is still very, very high at 6.1, so there's a lot of accumulation happening to this name. Next up, we've got Nvidia, and had a super powerful move here, a 2-2 reversal, as well as a 3-bar break to the upside, and a breakout to all-time highs today above this high right here. And just look at the volume down here, super strong signs of accumulation, and a powerful move off the lows here off the 50 SMA. So this looks strong, and we'll see if it can kind of consolidate here and set up another short-term entry, or potentially it'll just take off from this point. DEN continues to trend beautifully above the 21 EMA, right to all-time high, short-term extended, but looks very strong. Great volume as well coming into this name. AMAT, similar to Nvidia, looks strong, but not nearly as strong as Nvidia. This looks like it's the leader among that group, but AMAT and LRCX are also kind of forming a very similar pattern at this point, but you can clearly see that Nvidia is much, much stronger. ZIM also trending above the 21 EMA, looks strong, right near all-time highs. STLD trending and staying above that 21 EMA, looks pretty good. NUE, very similar, above the 21 EMA. Path, frustrating a lot of people, but I still think this is an IPO to watch if it can recover. This range is pretty wide, and this is a 3-bar to the downside, a kind of bearish outside bar. So I might expect some short-term weakness, but if it does kind of have an expectation breaker and open within this bar to the upside, definitely want to watch, because certainly a lot of traders got stopped out on this day, and you really want to see volume coming into the upside. That's one thing we haven't seen on this move up. A lot of pocket pivots like we've seen in Roblox, for instance, the volume come in. So watch for that and see if we can kind of tighten up right above this pivot. And finally, we've got UPST, a very strong stock here, powerful move off the bottom here, and now it's just kind of going back and forth right near all-time highs. And it did try to break out here on this Thursday, but had a reversal on this day. And the ranges on this one are still quite wide, around 10%. And really what I'm waiting for this one is for it to kind of tighten up on this right-hand side, kind of just drift sideways, get people kind of bored of this stock, and then really take off through these highs right here. So that is my list of potential new leadership. Let me know down below in the comments any stocks I should add to this list. Now moving on, let's talk about old leaders from 2020 and sorting by the weekly change. We did have some nice moves this week. GRWG still below the declining 50 SMA, but making some nice moves to the upside and nice volume coming in today, especially. EXPI also moving off the lows, but still below a declining 50 SMA. Futu back above that key level, as well as the 21 EMA, so maybe forming the right side of this potential base. Upwork back above these key levels as well, and you can see it kind of reclaimed this high volume close, as well as this one, as well as the anchored VWAP from this earnings gap up, and that was on 11.5. Zscaler, a nice earnings gap up here, and still has kind of 200 as resistance, but pretty constructive action here. Not a close on this day of greater than 50%, but so far it is hanging in there, and we'll see if we can kind of push through this high on above average volume. This is kind of a pivot at this point, as well as this close is also a pivot. NEO back above the key moving averages and just below the 200-day it looks like, but potentially could be forming the right side here, or the start of the right side, but definitely has a lot of work to do before getting back to all-time highs. Skills still having trouble with the 50 SMA here, and still below this anchored VWAP from the highs, which has been resistance on this occasion as well as this occasion. So I think this is still no touch for me. It's pretty much dead in the water until it can kind of get back above this high as well as the anchored VWAP. And overall, it's just not on my focus list because it's not trending near all-time highs. Fiverr, nice move here, reclaiming the 50 SMA. All the key moving averages are curling up, which is good to see. SQ back above the 21 EMA, but still below a declining 50 SMA. CELH looks pretty good. And if we go over to this board right here, actually, let me just draw it again. You've got this kind of line in the sand here. Actually, right here. That's what I wanted. So overall, you've got this breakout to all-time highs. This is a potential resistance level, but it did kind of fail this intermediate level resistance here on this Friday. But I think it would be very constructive if it kind of drifts sideways for the next few weeks and then challenges all-time highs. PLTR, not a great close on this day, but it's back above the 50 and 21 EMA. Peloton, really strong move here. A nice volume coming in right here on the 26 and back above the anchored VWAP, as well as the 50 and 21 EMA. It still is below the 200-day and had a little bit of resistance there today on this Friday. But overall, we'll see if it can kind of retake that level next week. Net, I've got post-market turned on. That's why that's a crazy bar there. But overall, back above all the key moving averages, as well as, I believe, the anchored VWAP from the highs, if I draw that in. And overall, not a great day on this Friday, but it was on very low volume compared to this day, and really strong upside reversal action on this Thursday. Tesla just back above the 21 EMA, but still below a lot of key moving averages, as well as the anchored VWAP from the highs. And overall, this looks like it still needs a lot of time. Pins still hasn't quite challenged this earnings gap up close here, and that will be a very critical level, as well as the declining 50 SMA. Twilio still below the declining 50 SMA, but back above the 221 EMA. Teladoc needs a lot of time here. Still has a lot of work to do and a lot to prove before I would consider an entry. Twitter, back above the earnings gap up high, and nice move here. So this looks better than pins at this point, but overall still below a declining 50 SMA, and it has a lot of healing to do before I would consider an entry. Apps back above the 21 EMA, but still below a declining 50 SMA. CrowdStrike looks pretty strong and looks very constructive here, and we'll see if it can kind of go sideways here for a week or two, then push through this on volume, and that would present a pretty good early entry. TSM back above all the key moving averages, and a nice move here, but no real volume to the upside during this move upwards. Roku back above the key moving averages, but once again, no real volume coming in, and it has a lot of work to do. These are significant resistance points at around 375 as well as 400. SC looks better than most of these. You can see it's back above all the key moving averages, but still has to overcome this kind of resistance level at 270 or so. Shop constructive looks like it's just kind of going sideways this past week. You want to see it overcome this level on volume. EMPH still below a declining 50 SMA, but back above the 221 EMA. Corsair is still just kind of going sideways here as it has been for the past few months. And finally, we've got Etsy, which is staying above the high volume close, but is still struggling with the 200-day and is below the declining 21 and 50 SMA. So overall, some of these are looking better. CrowdStrike, Futu, for instance. But overall, a lot of these need still significant time and just want to go sideways for a few months before I would consider taking an entry. And moving on to the indexes on a weekly chart, let's first take a look at the QQQ. And overall did have a 2-2 reversal through this high, as well as overtaking this high as well. Looks pretty strong above the 10-week now and above a rising 30-week. So this is in a stage 2 uptrend. And going over to a comparison chart, actually the Webby RSI, let's take a look at that. Overall, the Nasdaq Composite is in a healthy range on this metric. And looking at the 50-day check, let's make sure this is actually the 50-day. It's actually the 21 EMA at this point. So let me change that real quick. Boom. So overall, this is still in normal territory here, just 1.32% above that moving average. So moving on now to the SPY, let's go back to a weekly chart. Overall, this also had a 2-2 reversal through this week's high. The expectation is sideways or higher for this as well as the QQQ. And overall, you can see it's above a rising 10 and 30-week SMA looks pretty strong. Looking at the IWM, there's also a 2-2 reversal and retook the 10-week as well. And overall, it's above a rising 30-week, so it is in a stage 2 uptrend. Looking at the IWO, this also retook the 30-week, which is a good sign, but it still isn't quite above the 50 SMA at this point. And let me get rid of this extra moving average. And overall, the expectation is sideways or higher, and we are barely in a stage 2 uptrend at this point. Moving on, let's take a look at the FTY. This is above the 30-week once again. Didn't quite have the 2-2 reversal. It couldn't quite overcome this high here. And we are still below a declining 10-week. So I do want to see us kind of stick above that key moving average next week. But overall, the expectation is sideways or higher at this point, and we are in a stage 2 uptrend. Looking at GLD, this continues to kind of rally very strongly off the lows here above the 30-week moving average. A nice support on this week right here off that key moving average, and overall nice fall through on this week. And this week, the expectation is sideways or higher, but definitely a little bit short-term extended at this point as it tries to build out the right side of this longer-term base. And looking at GBTC, you can see it did not close well this week. And overall, you really want to see it hold above this low right here. And the expectation from this week is sideways or lower, below a increasing 30-week, but below a declining 10-week. And definitely looks like it's kind of building out a longer-term base and needs some time. Looking at ETHE, this looks a little bit stronger, but still not a great close here. The expectation is pretty much just sideways. And once again, you want to see it hold above this low right here and kind of stick above this pivot as well at around 25 if possible. And lastly, let's take a look at the VIX. Big decrease this week, which is a good sign, but we could get a nice pop in the coming weeks as well. And actually, finally, let's take a look at DIA. Also a 2-2 reversal here through this high. The expectation is sideways or higher, and we are in a rising stage 2 uptrend. So overall, nice fall through on the QQQ, the SPY, and many of these ETFs. Bitcoin and Ethereum look like they need a lot of time here. And overall, it looks like the QQQ and overall growth stocks in general are kind of getting some rotation back into these type of names. So positive signs for growth stock traders, and overall things look pretty good from an index point of view. So lastly, let's talk about my focus list and how it performed this past week. So sorting about the weekly change, 11 out of the 16 were green on the week. And now let's go through each of their charts. Roblox, very strong move up here, definitely short-term extended, but very powerful here. And this is a potential leader in my opinion. Dash, nice move up here, especially on this Thursday. Nice consolidation day on this Friday on lower volume. And you really want to see this kind of move up here and challenge this pivot right here. ASO, nice move up here. We already talked about this. Good volume coming in as well. FNKO, retaining that 25 level. BGFE, nice move, especially on this Wednesday. And then 2 down days, consolidation days on lower volume. So I want to see a push back up on increasing volume through this pivot here at around 32.96. AMAT, nice move this week. It's pretty much just going sideways here. Nvidia is the kind of clear leader, but this is also acting pretty well, but didn't have the greatest close on this Friday. CrowdStrike, we talked about it. I want to see it go sideways here below this pivot and then challenge that on volume. ABNB, nice move on this Thursday. Not the greatest day on this Friday, but it was on lower volume. So I'll watch how this acts. And overall, I definitely want to see it hold above this low as well as this key level. This is very early in the uptrend, and it has a lot to prove before challenging all-time highs. Crocs, nice move early in the week, but then a little bit of an expectation breaker here, a gap down and not a great close. And I actually let my shares go on this day after the close. But on this day, a nice upside reversal bar and a pretty strong close overall, retaking that 100 level, that Livermore level, as well as kind of re-challenging this close here, which has been support during this kind of sideways consolidation. And once again, a very strong close on volume. So actually looks pretty good and set up for next week if we do get some fall through and potentially a 2-2 reversal through this high. Corsair, still just going sideways here. Nice move on this day, upside reversal here. And we go to a weekly chart. It's pretty tight the last few weeks, almost 3 weeks tight. I think it's just a little bit too much of a decline this week, but very, very tight. nevertheless, and basically 2 inside weeks as well. So very tight basically in terms of closes as well as ranges. UPS still just going sideways here. A little bit of a fake out here on this downward trend line, but still just pretty much just going sideways. And you do see a lot of volume coming in here on the poor close. FOXF, you can see still just going sideways, a little bit of a fake out here on high volume. So still needs a little bit of time, but overall nice bar on this Friday. Path, we talked about it, very shaky action. I want to see it kind of retake this level and tighten up here near this high. UPST, we talked about it. ZNTL still just going sideways. Not the greatest action, but still not negative action either. And you can see a little bit of undercut and reclaim action on this Thursday. And finally, HYRE, it was short-term extended, and we definitely had a pretty powerful bar to the downside on this day. But overall, it actually recovered pretty well to end the week, although definitely this move up was on lower volume than this down day, which I'm sure stopped out a lot of people who use these days as their stop. So overall, pretty good week. Roblox, Dash, nice moves, and we'll see if we can kind of get some follow through and see if some stocks like Corsair, AB&B see some follow through off their lows, as well as Dash, which started something nice this past week. And moving on to sentiment, let's first take a look at my surveys here on Twitter. And overall, we had a big jump from 46.2% bullish to now 54.8% bullish. So this is a little bit high for my liking, but we are hopefully in the early stages of an uptrend, and a lot of things are ripping. So this type of bullishness is to be expected, in my opinion. Looking at the bulls versus bears poll, we're still actually decreasing on this metric, so that's a very good sign. Looking at the put call ratio, we're increasing a little bit, but did get very low. But as I said this past week, or at least last week, we did see a reading intraday of over 1. So this isn't too bad. And basically this entire year, the past 6 months or so, this reading has been very, very low. Looking now at the name exposure index, we did see a modest increase from 44.21, which was actually the lowest level since the March correction. And now we did see a jump to 68.3, but still not too extended here. And yeah, given the increases last week, it's not unexpected that this did increase. But overall, you do want to see this kind of stay below the 90s, 100s for sure. Moving on now to the Ibd Big Picture article. The headline is Stock Market Fades into the Close, but Textainer, Ulta Beauty score bullish gains. And they discussed inflation a little bit right here, saying that we increased 3.1% compared to the Fed's preferred target of 2%. They discuss the strong action in the FFTY helped by Nvidia, which was super strong this past week. And they also discussed the modest gains on the S&P 500, the Russell 2000 small cap, and how, although we did finish off the highs here on this Friday, we did avoid a distribution day because volume was lower. Overall, they discuss how we do have a bunch of distribution days on the S&P 500 and Nasdaq, but with the major indexes above their 50 days and near highs, it won't take much to put the stock market back into a confirmed uptrend. They discuss the FFTY here, the strong performances of CRCT, Snap, Zscaler, and CrowdStrike. And they also talk about TGH, which had a nice breakout here from this cup-shaped base and looks pretty strong, as well as Ulta, which faded after an entry. And you can see that overall shares were up 5%. So overall, their current outlook is an uptrend under pressure. And as I said, we have 6 distribution days on the S&P 500 and 4 on the Nasdaq. And finally, taking a look at the Gmi Signal, this is still green since May 26. And the overall GMI score on Friday was a 6 out of 6. And you can see that he's got the QQQ graph here with the red, white, blue pattern. And it looks like we're just emerging into a potential red, white, blue uptrend. So overall, taking everything into account, my current view is still an uptrend under pressure, but we are getting very close to a potential new uptrend. We do want to see some follow through and some kind of leadership groups to emerge. But we've got some really promising action from the semiconductor stocks, Nvidia, LRCX, AMAT, as well as some really strong action from recent IPOs like Roblox. And we'll see kind of what happens next week if stuff can kind of fall through to the upside and really cement this new uptrend. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'll see you guys in future videos.